The Supreme Court has dramatically changed the landscape of gun rights in America, issuing a decision that will have far-reaching consequences for how firearms are regulated across the country. This ruling marks a pivotal moment in the ongoing debate over the Second Amendment and the balance between individual rights and public safety. In a landmark move, the court struck down a New York law that had, for over a century, limited the ability of most citizens to carry concealed firearms in public spaces. The law required applicants to demonstrate a special need for self-protection, beyond that of the general public, in order to obtain a concealed carry permit. This is the most significant Second Amendment case in more than a decade, directly affecting how states can regulate the carrying of firearms outside the home. The decision signals a shift in the legal landscape, making it clear that the right to bear arms is not confined to one's residence but extends into the public sphere. The case at the center of this decision, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association Inc. versus Bruin, challenged a law that had stood for over 100 years. The law required individuals to show proper cause to obtain a concealed carry license, a standard that was often difficult to meet for ordinary citizens. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court ruled that this requirement violates the Constitution, affirming that the right to carry a handgun for self-defense is not limited to the home. The majority opinion emphasized that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to carry firearms in public for self-defense. As a result, similar laws in other states, such as California, Massachusetts, and New Jersey, are now invalid, forcing those states to reconsider and potentially rewrite their gun regulations. The ruling sets a much tougher standard for any future gun control measures, requiring states to justify restrictions based on historical tradition. The decision comes at a time of intense national debate over gun violence and public safety, landing squarely in the middle of a contentious and emotional issue. Advocates on both sides are reacting strongly, with some celebrating the expansion of gun rights, while others fear it could lead to increased violence. The majority's message is clear. The right to self-defense, as protected by the Constitution, extends into public spaces. This means that law-abiding citizens in restrictive states will now find it much easier to obtain permits and legally carry concealed firearms as they go about their daily lives. In states that previously made it difficult to carry a firearm in public, the process will become significantly more accessible. More people will be able to legally carry concealed weapons, changing the daily reality for millions of Americans. In states with already permissive gun laws like Texas or Florida, the impact of the ruling is less immediate, but it reinforces the legal foundation for their existing policies and may influence future legislation. The ruling also establishes a new legal test for evaluating gun laws, requiring courts to look at the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. This puts many existing and future regulations under scrutiny, as lawmakers and judges grapple with how to interpret this new standard. The precedent set by this decision will shape all future gun legislation nationwide, influencing how states and cities craft their laws and how courts evaluate challenges to those laws. Ultimately, the boundaries of state and local authority to regulate firearms have been fundamentally redrawn, ushering in a new era for gun rights and gun control in America. The effects of this decision will be felt for years to come as the nation continues to grapple with the complex issues surrounding guns, rights, and public safety. The Supreme Court invalidated New York's requirement that applicants prove a special need for a concealed carry permit. The majority said law-abiding citizens with ordinary self-defense needs have a right to carry handguns in public. States can still require licenses, but must use objective criteria, like background checks and training, not subjective standards. The ruling pushes states toward shall-issue systems, where permits are granted to anyone who qualifies. Sensitive places like schools and courthouses can still prohibit firearms, but the court left the definition open for future cases. This new standard affirms the Second Amendment as a fundamental right, not a privilege. All gun regulations must now align with the nation's historical tradition, shifting how courts analyze Second Amendment challenges. Justice Clarence Thomas, writing for the majority, anchored the decision in history and tradition. He argued that modern gun laws must have clear historical parallels to be constitutional. The court rejected balancing public safety against gun rights, demanding that regulations fit within America's historical tradition. Thomas's review found no precedent for broadly denying law-abiding citizens the right to carry in public. The opinion asserts self-defense rights extend beyond the home, and crime prevention cannot override constitutional rights. States may still require background checks and training, but cannot grant permits on a discretionary basis. The ruling frames gun rights as equal for all law-abiding citizens, not just a select few. The burden now falls on states to justify gun laws with historical evidence. Justice Stephen Breyer's dissent warned the ruling would harm public safety and limit states' ability to address gun violence. He criticized the majority's history-only test as impractical, arguing judges aren't historians and modern problems need modern solutions. Breyer cited a tradition of regulating firearms in public, especially in cities, and accused the majority of cherry-picking history. The dissent argued New York's law was a legitimate response to urban safety challenges. Breyer saw the decision as judicial overreach, replacing legislative judgment with the court's own. He predicted more guns in public and greater risks, urging that firearm regulation be left to elected officials. The dissent called for judicial restraint and a balanced approach to gun laws. The Supreme Court's ruling sent shockwaves across the nation, igniting immediate and deeply polarized reactions from the public and political leaders alike. As news of the decision broke, Americans everywhere tuned in, their faces reflecting a mix of hope, anger, and uncertainty. Gun rights advocates erupted in celebration, hailing the verdict as a historic victory and a long-awaited restoration of what they see as fundamental constitutional rights. For many, it was a moment of triumph, a validation of their belief in the Second Amendment's broad protections. Organizations like the NRA quickly praised the decision, calling it a win for personal freedom. Rallies and gatherings broke out in cities and towns, with supporters waving banners and chanting in support of expanded gun rights. In sharp contrast, gun control advocates and numerous public officials condemned the ruling, warning that it could put countless communities at greater risk. They argued that loosening gun restrictions would make it harder to prevent gun violence and mass shootings. Protests erupted in major cities, with demonstrators demanding stronger gun laws and expressing fear for public safety. State leaders in affected regions voiced deep concern, arguing that the decision undermines their ability to protect citizens. President Biden called the decision deeply disappointing, saying it was at odds with both common sense and the wishes of most Americans. He urged Congress to take action to address gun violence in the wake of the ruling. Meanwhile, Republican lawmakers and conservative leaders hailed the ruling as a crucial defense of individual liberty and constitutional rights, framing it as a victory for freedom. On the other side, Democrats vowed to fight back by introducing new restrictions and legislation, determined to work within the court's framework to strengthen gun safety measures. The sharp divide in reactions highlights the deep and persistent national polarization over gun control, with both sides more entrenched than ever. For some Americans, the ruling is a powerful affirmation of their right to self-defense and personal security, reinforcing their belief in responsible gun ownership. For others, it represents a dangerous prioritization of gun rights over public safety, fueling fears that more lives could be lost to gun violence. The Supreme Court's decision has only intensified the national debate, hardening positions and sparking passionate arguments in communities, legislatures, and the media. As the controversy continues, firearms remain a defining and divisive issue at the very heart of American culture and politics, shaping the nation's identity and future. The ruling directly impacts states with may-issue concealed carry laws: New York, California, Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. These states, home to a quarter of Americans, must now adopt shall-issue systems based on objective criteria. Officials are revising permit procedures, dropping requirements for applicants to show special need. Lawmakers are exploring new restrictions, like expanding sensitive places and enhancing training. The ruling's effects will ripple nationwide, as any gun law could now face legal challenges under the new historical test. Legal experts predict a surge of lawsuits targeting a wide range of firearm regulations. The legal landscape for gun ownership is rapidly changing, especially in urban, densely populated states. The Bruen decision marks a seismic shift in Second Amendment law, fundamentally altering how courts evaluate gun regulations. Instead of relying on the familiar balancing tests that weighed public safety against individual rights, the Supreme Court has now mandated a strict historical standard. This means that any modern gun law must be justified by showing it is consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation, dating back to the founding era. Courts across the country are now tasked with a challenging new responsibility, determining whether today's gun laws truly align with those from centuries ago. This shift makes it significantly more difficult for lawmakers to defend gun control measures, as they must find clear historical precedents to support modern regulations. Judges, who are legal experts but not trained historians, now face a daunting task. They must interpret and apply laws from a vastly different era, often with limited historical records. This uncertainty is likely to result in inconsistent rulings from one court to another, as each judge navigates the complexities of centuries-old legal traditions. One of the most contentious issues is the definition of sensitive places, areas where guns can be restricted. States and gun rights groups are gearing up for intense legal battles over where firearms can and cannot be carried, with each side preparing to argue their case in court. Ongoing litigation will play a crucial role in shaping how the Bruin ruling is interpreted and enforced, especially as some states move to expand gun-free zones while others push back against new restrictions. For gun owners, the legal landscape is in constant flux. New state laws are being introduced, and court battles are unfolding across the country, creating confusion and uncertainty about what is allowed and what is not. The Supreme Court's decision has opened a new chapter in the ongoing gun debate. Now, it's up to the courts to define the boundaries of this expanded right, setting precedents that will impact Americans for generations to come. The practical impact is already being felt. More citizens are now eligible to carry firearms in public spaces. However, the legal environment remains unsettled, with many questions still unanswered and new challenges emerging every day. Ultimately, the future of gun regulation in America will be determined in the courts, as judges and lawmakers grapple with the far-reaching consequences of this landmark decision. States are scrambling to adapt, with some quickly implementing shall-issue systems and others testing the limits of the Bruin decision. New laws expand sensitive places, require more training, and add hurdles like social media checks, setting up new legal battles. The federal government faces challenges too, as the historical test now applies to federal gun laws. Passing new gun control measures is harder, with every law subject to the court's rigorous standard. The coming years will see intense litigation over sensitive places, red flag laws, and assault weapon bans. The courts will slowly define the practical meaning of the ruling. For Americans, the gun debate is far from over. It's entered a new, uncertain phase. The legal and political turbulence will shape the future of gun rights and regulation. The Supreme Court's Bruin decision is a watershed, expanding the right to carry firearms in public and raising the bar for gun control nationwide. States must dismantle discretionary permit systems, leading to more citizens carrying guns in urban areas. The ruling has deepened national divisions and intensified the political debate over guns. The new historical test leaves many questions about sensitive places, modern regulations, and judicial consistency unanswered. The courts will be the next battleground, determining the scope of this, right through years of litigation. The debate over guns is reframed, with history at its center and the future of regulation uncertain. Guns, rights, and public safety remain one of America's most complex and defining challenges.